At some point in your life, you made a promise. Maybe it wasn't spoken aloud. Maybe it wasn't written down in a journal or shared with anyone else. But you made a promise to yourself. You promised that you would try harder, that you wouldn't settle for less than you were capable of, that you would push beyond the limits of fear and doubt. And for a while, maybe, you believed in that promise. You acted as though the fire inside you was unquenchable. You believed that nothing could pull you away from the path you imagined for yourself. And then life happened. The first time you stumbled, it didn't feel significant. You told yourself it was a learning experience. You told yourself that tomorrow would be better. The second time, the excuses began to feel more familiar than the courage that had carried you before. By the third, fourth, and fifth times, you began to realize something terrifying. You were drifting away from the person you had once promised to become. And it didn't feel dramatic. There was no explosion, no loud announcement. There was only a quiet erosion of your standards, a slow surrender to comfort, a series of small compromises that piled on top of one another until you barely recognized yourself. The hardest truth about self-betrayal is that it doesn't come with an alarm. You don't wake up one morning and realize, I have failed myself. It sneaks in when you start choosing what is easy over what is right, when you stop honoring the commitments that only you can see, when you allow fear, doubt, and fatigue to outweigh the quiet whisper of your own conscience, and slowly, invisibly, it chips away at something far more precious than success, wealth, or recognition. It chips away at self-trust, the unspoken contract between you and the person you agreed to become. And that is where the apology begins. Not with regret, not with shame, not with the hollow muttering of I'm sorry. The apology begins with clarity. It begins with the ability to look yourself in the mirror and say, without excuses, without negotiation, without evasion, I knew what I needed to do, and I didn't do it. I chose comfort over growth. I abandoned my values. That is the foundation of every comeback. Because a comeback is not about proving yourself to others. It is not about silencing critics or making your success visible. A comeback is an apology to the one person whose opinion matters more than anyone else. The person you see in the mirror every day. The person whose respect you lost. The person whose faith you broke. That is the person you must reconcile with. That is the person to whom this comeback must be directed. When we talk about failure, we often talk about external setbacks. Losing opportunities, falling short of goals, being judged by the world. But the deepest form of failure is internal. It is the silent agreement you break with yourself every time you settle, every time you procrastinate, every time you let fear decide your choices. The deeper the compromise, the heavier the weight, until you feel lost in a life that is technically fine, but spiritually empty. And the reason you feel lost is not because the world has judged you. It is because you have judged yourself, and you are disappointed by the person staring back at you. That disappointment, if you allow it, can be transformative. Because here's the truth. You cannot repair what you do not acknowledge. You cannot rebuild trust with yourself if you do not first recognize where it was broken. Most people avoid this reflection. Most people run from the quiet moments when the truth of their choices confronts them. They distract themselves with busyness, social validation, or the hope that someday, somehow, the feelings of self-betrayal will fade. They won't. Self-betrayal is a teacher, and it teaches relentlessly until you listen. The first step toward a true comeback is to stop running. Stop pretending that everything is fine. Stop trying to convince yourself that this is just a temporary pause or a necessary detour. Face the truth of your choices. Understand not just what you did, but why you did it. Fear is often the disguised reason. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of discomfort. Comfort is often the disguised culprit. Comfort in routines, comfort in excuses, comfort in mediocrity. And too often we mistake convenience for wisdom, ease for intelligence, inaction for prudence. Once you see the root of your drift, you can begin to reclaim the narrative. You start by owning the moments you failed, not to dwell in them, not to punish yourself, but to understand them. Ownership is not shame. Ownership is courage. It is the acknowledgement that the past cannot be changed, but the future can be designed deliberately. Ownership is the moment you stop blaming circumstances, other people, or luck for the trajectory you find yourself in. It is the moment you accept full responsibility for your choices, and in doing so, regain the power to change them. And that is the difference between a temporary resolution and a comeback. A resolution is a fleeting promise to do better tomorrow. A comeback is a deliberate act of alignment. It is the conscious decision to restore your self-respect by taking action that proves your word matters. And here's what makes it profound. This comeback does not require grandeur, spectacle, or immediate results. It requires consistency. It requires showing up even when no one is watching and honoring the smallest commitments with integrity. Because self-trust is rebuilt in micro decisions, not headlines. The comeback you are about to embark on is not about creating a new version of yourself. It is about returning to the version of yourself you have always known, the one you respected, the one you promised to honor. That version of you has always existed, waiting for you to stop negotiating with your standards, waiting for you to stop giving permission to fear and laziness to dictate your life, waiting for you to act consistently on what you know to be true. And let me be clear, this journey will not be comfortable. It will require you to face the truth of who you were and who you allowed yourself to become. It will require discipline of our motivation, action over hesitation, and integrity over convenience. But it will also be liberating. Because as you begin to align your actions with your values, the heavy weight of self-betrayal begins to lift. You will find clarity where once there was confusion. You will find energy where once there was fatigue. You will find purpose where once there was apathy. And more importantly, you will regain a voice that has been silent far too long, the voice of self-respect, trust, and confidence. So start with honesty. Be brutal with yourself if you have to, because the truth will always be kinder in the long run than illusions. Acknowledge the promises you broke. Acknowledge the moments you surrendered to fear. Acknowledge the comfort you chose over courage. And then make a decision. Decide that from this moment forward, every choice, every action, every commitment will be a step toward reconciliation with yourself, not for applause, not for recognition, not for validation, but for the one person who deserves it most, you. Because at the end of the day, the deepest wounds are not inflicted by the world. They are inflicted by ourselves. And the deepest healing comes not from external approval, but from the restoration of self-trust. When you make this comeback, you are not simply chasing success. You are reclaiming your word, your integrity, and your dignity. And that is worth more than any recognition, more than any material gain, more than any fleeting motivation. This is your moment. Not because it is easy, not because it is popular, and not because it is guaranteed to succeed, but because it is necessary. Because the one person you owe the most is yourself. Because a life lived in alignment with your values is the only apology that matters. We often spend more time obsessing over the fall than the reason for the fall. We replay the moment we tripped, the moment we missed an opportunity, the moment we disappointed ourselves. We focus on the stumble, the failure, the setback, as if the act itself defines us. And yet the truth is far more subtle. The act is only the symptom. The real story, the story that determines whether we rise, whether we recover, whether we come back stronger, is why we fell in the first place. Why matters more than how, because why reveals the patterns we cannot see when we are caught in the whirlwind of events. Why exposes the fears, the compromises, the blind spots, and the small concessions that quietly eroded our integrity. Why is the invisible current that drags us downstream, even when we feel like we are swimming with all our strength? And unless we understand why, every attempt at a comeback will be temporary, fragile, and incomplete. Think about it. Two people can experience the same failure, but their outcomes will be worlds apart, not because of the circumstances, but because of their why. One person falls, examines the roots, and transforms the insight into action. They emerge stronger, wiser, more aligned. Another person falls, blames the circumstances, resists introspection, and drifts further from their purpose. The fall is identical. The difference is the why. The why is personal. It is intimate. It is often uncomfortable to confront because it forces honesty about the compromises we have been making quietly over time. Maybe you fell back because you were afraid of judgment, afraid that success would alienate you from familiar people, afraid that growth would be lonely. Maybe you fell because you sought comfort in routines, relationships, or habits that didn't align with your values. Maybe you fell because you believed someone else's definition of what is possible and abandoned your own vision. None of these reasons are inherently shameful. They are human. And that is precisely why they matter. If you ignore them, they will continue to steer your life. If you fail to understand them, every comeback will be a temporary spark, doomed to fade the moment fear or comfort appears again. But if you confront them, if you trace every misstep back to its root, you gain something invaluable: awareness. Awareness is power. Awareness is freedom. Awareness is the moment you reclaim the steering wheel of your life. Understanding why you fell also gives meaning to the failure itself. Failure without meaning is pain. Failure with meaning is a lesson. And the difference between a lesson and pain is perspective. Perspective is gained by asking the hard questions, the questions we often avoid. What choices did I make that pulled me away from myself? What fears or doubts silently dictated my decisions? Where did I stop listening to the voice inside me that always knew what was right? These questions are uncomfortable because they cut to the core of self-betrayal, but they are necessary because they reveal the blueprint of your comeback. When you see the why clearly, you can take deliberate action. The moment you understand the invisible forces that caused your drift, you can identify which decisions, habits, and beliefs need to be realigned. You stop reacting to life and start designing it. You stop asking, how do I recover? And start asking, what must I rebuild to ensure I never drift like this again? And that shift from reaction to design, from survival to leadership, is the essence of every meaningful comeback. Here is another truth most people miss. The fall itself is temporary. It doesn't define you. But the reason you fell can define you forever unless you face it. If you let it remain invisible, you will unconsciously repeat it. You will stumble down the same patterns in different circumstances until eventually the weight of repeated compromises becomes unbearable. But if you illuminate the why, the patterns are broken. You gain clarity. You gain foresight. You gain control. You gain the ability to say, I will not allow these hidden forces to govern my life anymore. Confronting the why also restores empathy toward yourself. Too often we treat our failures with harsh judgment, condemning ourselves for weakness or laziness. But when you understand why you fell, you see yourself differently. You see a human being navigating fear, uncertainty, and conflicting desires. You see someone making choices based on survival instincts, not malice. You see a person who may have drifted, but who still possesses the capacity for courage, discipline, and alignment. Understanding why allows you to replace shame with compassion and compassion with action. Your why also connects the past with the future. It creates a bridge from the person you were to the person you are becoming. Without understanding why, the past is a cage. Every memory of failure, disappointment, or lost opportunity becomes a weight that drags you down. With understanding, the past becomes a guide, a teacher, a blueprint. You can trace every misstep back to its root and see a roadmap for how to move forward intentionally. You don't just stumble blindly into your comeback, you navigate it with awareness, precision, and integrity. And here is the most important lesson of all. Your why is not a static, singular explanation. It is layered, complex, and sometimes uncomfortable. There is rarely a single reason for a setback. Fear, doubt, laziness, external pressures, misaligned priorities, all of these converge. Part of the comeback is untangling these threads, understanding each one, and addressing them deliberately. This is why a true comeback takes time. It is not a sprint, it is an excavation, a deep dive into your beliefs, choices, and behaviors to reveal the hidden truths that have been steering your life unconsciously. When you do this work, you begin to see a pattern in all your past setbacks. You begin to recognize the invisible forces that have pulled you off course repeatedly. And with recognition comes power. You are no longer at the mercy of invisible currents. You are no longer drifting unconsciously. You are no longer a victim of circumstances, people, or fear. You are aware. You are intentional. You are aligned. You are leading your own life from the inside out. Understanding why you fell also prepares you for the inevitable challenges ahead. Because the truth is, life will continue to test you. Fear will return. Comfort will beckon. Old habits will whisper familiar lies. But when you know why you stumbled in the past, you are prepared to respond differently. You can recognize the pattern before it controls you. You can make a conscious choice rather than a reflexive surrender. You can choose courage over fear, alignment over ease, and action over hesitation. Ultimately, the why is the foundation of trust with yourself. Without understanding why you fell, you cannot fully trust yourself to make better choices in the future. Every small compromise will feel like a repeat of the past. Every decision will carry the ghost of regret. But when you illuminate why, you can say, I understand myself. I understand my tendencies. I see the invisible forces, and I will act differently. That understanding becomes the backbone of your self-respect and the engine of your comeback. So don't focus on the fall itself. Don't obsess over the moment you tripped, the failure you endured, or the opportunity you lost. Those are only symptoms. Focus on the why. Dig deep. Ask the hard questions. Examine your fears, your compromises, and the invisible forces that led you away from your path. Let this reflection be uncomfortable. Let it challenge your assumptions. Let it push you to see yourself with brutal honesty. Because once you see the why, the comeback is no longer about chasing motivation. It is no longer about temporary discipline or fleeting inspiration. It is about building a life that is deliberately aligned with your values, your promises, and your purpose. Once you understand why you fell, every step you take moving forward is guided by awareness, integrity, and intentionality. And that is what transforms a comeback into a personal apology to yourself, a restoration of trust, a renewal of discipline, and a reclaiming of the person you were always meant to be. There is a quiet cost to playing small. Most people do not see it at first because the sacrifice is invisible. It doesn't show up on a bank statement or in a performance report. It doesn't get acknowledged by friends, family, or colleagues, but it is real and it is heavy. It lives in the small choices you make every day, the choices to hide your ideas, to shrink yourself so others feel comfortable, to settle for less than you are capable of. Each decision seems insignificant in isolation, but over time, the accumulation of compromises begins to weigh on your spirit. And that weight, though silent, is the unmistakable mark of self-betrayal. Self-betrayal is not dramatic. It doesn't arrive with a loud crash. It creeps in slowly, almost unnoticed. You tell yourself, I'll start tomorrow, or this is good enough for now, or I'm not ready yet. And each time you settle, each time you dim your light, you are telling yourself a story that erodes your integrity. You are sending the message that your word, your commitment, and your potential do not matter. And the problem is, when you begin to accept that narrative, it spreads. It infects your decisions, your relationships, and your confidence. You start playing small because you no longer trust yourself to stand tall. Most people underestimate how seductive this is. Playing small feels safe. It is predictable. It avoids criticism, it avoids risk, and it spares the ego from temporary discomfort. You may feel comfortable, protected, even proud of your careful navigation of life. And yet, beneath that comfort, a quiet voice grows louder, a voice that knows you are betraying the very person you promised to honor. You hear it in moments of reflection, in fleeting doubts, in the emptiness that comes when achievements feel hollow. That voice is not punishment, it is truth. And if you ignore it, it will continue to haunt every corner of your life until you answer it with action. Self-betrayal is the cost of playing small because every time you settle for less than your potential, you pay a tax. You pay it in confidence, in energy, in clarity, and in joy. The more you avoid confronting what you are capable of, the further you drift from your own purpose. The more you hide your ideas, your vision, your voice, the less capable you feel of leading your own life. And that is the paradox, the very thing you try to protect by playing small. The sense of security, the avoidance of failure ends up eroding your foundation, leaving you vulnerable to fear, regret, and mediocrity. Playing small is deceptively easy because it distracts you with temporary relief. You feel less pressure, less responsibility, less scrutiny. You avoid uncomfortable conversations, risky decisions, and the challenge of growth. But in doing so, you slowly erode your trust in yourself. You stop believing that you can achieve what you know you are capable of. You stop respecting the voice inside that guided you before you learned to settle. And when you lose that self-respect, Every victory feels hollow, every achievement feels temporary, and every opportunity feels tainted by the awareness that you could have done more. Consider this: the cost of betrayal is cumulative. It doesn't arrive in one moment, one decision, or one failure. It accumulates silently, like water slowly eroding stone. One small compromise leads to another. One unkept promise leads to another. One fear-driven decis ion leads to another, until eventually you look back and realize that you are not living the life you imagined. That the dreams you once nurtured, the ambitions you once carried, have been replaced with comfort, excuses, and quiet resignation. And that realization, when it comes, is not just disappointing, it is painful. It is the heavy, silent toll of a life where self-betrayal became habitual. The people who play small do not always look like they are failing. On the outside, they may appear successful, respected, even admired. They may have achieved stability, recognition, or comfort, but internally, they are often disconnected from themselves. They have given up the fight to honor their full potential. They have surrendered their own standards for approval, ease, or fear avoidance. They live in a kind of quiet tension, a life that is technically safe but spiritually unfulfilled. And that tension is the first sign that self-betrayal has taken root. Here's the uncomfortable truth: self-betrayal is avoidable. It is avoidable the moment you decide to stop playing small, the moment you choose alignment over comfort, the moment you prioritize integrity over expediency. But it requires courage, the kind of courage that is not celebrated in speeches, books, or social media posts. The courage to look at yourself honestly, to face the small compromises, the fears, and the excuses you have allowed to dictate your actions. The courage to acknowledge that the path of comfort has come at the expense of your integrity. And the courage to act differently from that moment onward, regardless of how inconvenient or difficult it may be. Self-betrayal is not permanent. It is reversible. But only if you respond with deliberate action. Every small step toward honoring your values, every decision to speak your truth, every moment you act in alignment with your vision restores the trust you may have lost. Rebuilding self-respect is like rebuilding a structure from the foundation up. You cannot skip the small steps. You cannot rely on motivation alone. You must act consistently, deliberately, and in alignment with the principles you know to be true. That is how the cost of betrayal is repaid, through persistent action, not temporary emotion. And here is the beauty of understanding this cost. Once you recognize it, you cannot unsee it. You begin to notice the subtle ways you compromise. You begin to see where you have dimmed your light to make others comfortable. You begin to understand the invisible tax you have been paying for convenience and fear. And awareness is power. Awareness allows you to reclaim your life, to act with intention, and to ensure that your choices reflect your true potential rather than the limitations imposed by fear or habit. Playing small may have felt safe, but it is never neutral. Every decision to shrink, hide, or settle carries a price. And the sooner you confront that reality, the sooner you can stop paying it. The sooner you acknowledge the quiet erosion of your standards, the sooner you can take deliberate steps to restore your integrity. The sooner you act in alignment with your full potential, the sooner you reclaim the energy, confidence, and clarity that were quietly siphoned away. The truth is, life will always test you. Fear, doubt, and external pressures will continue to appear. But when you recognize the cost of playing small, you no longer respond reflexively. You see the patterns, you understand the stakes, and you act intentionally. You choose courage over comfort, alignment over expediency, and action over hesitation. And with every aligned action, the cost of betrayal diminishes, replaced with the growing power of self-respect and self-trust. Playing small is a choice. Self-betrayal is a consequence, but both are reversible. Every decision you make moving forward can be a declaration of integrity. Every commitment you keep to yourself can restore trust. Every action that honors your potential diminishes the debt you owe yourself. And in time, you will realize that the cost of playing small was never permanent. It was simply a teacher, a mirror showing you what happens when you stop honoring yourself, and a guide pointing to the path of reclaiming your life. The choice is yours. You can continue to play small, to hide, to shrink, to avoid discomfort. Or you can recognize the cost, face it honestly, and decide that every step you take from this moment forward will be aligned with your highest potential. That is the essence of self-respect. That is the essence of integrity. That is the essence of a comeback. That is truly an apology to yourself. Too often, we wait for feelings to change before we act. We wait for motivation to arrive, for energy to surge, for the perfect moment to present itself. We think that if we feel inspired, we will move. But the truth is that feelings are fleeting. Motivation is temporary. Inspiration comes and goes like the wind. If we allow ourselves to depend on mood, we will never reclaim what we have lost because mood is a passenger, not a driver. A calm e-back cannot be left to feelings. It must be rooted in a decision, a deliberate, unwavering, non-negotiable decision to act, to align, to restore what has been broken. A decision is powerful because it is intentional. It does not wait for convenience. It does not rely on emotion. It is a choice that says, I will not allow circumstances, fear, or fatigue to dictate my life anymore. A decision is the anchor that keeps you steady when storms come, when setbacks occur, and when the path forward feels uncertain. A decision is the moment when you reclaim ownership of your life, refusing to drift along invisible currents any longer. And that is why a comeback begins with a decision, not with a fleeting mood. When you wait for motivation, you are at the mercy of forces outside yourself. Motivation may come today and vanish tomorrow. Mood may lift when everything seems perfect and vanish when life shows its challenges. If your comeback depends on these temporary states, it will always be fragile, unstable, and incomplete. But a decision is constant. It is a commitment that persists beyond emotion, beyond circumstance, beyond the ebb and flow of energy. A decision is the unshakable foundation on which every action, every habit, every choice is built. Making a decision to come back is not a one-time act. It is not a momentary burst of enthusiasm. It is a series of choices, repeated over and over again, in alignment with the intention you set. You decide to honor your commitments when it is inconvenient. You decide to act when you are tired. You decide to persevere when fear, doubt, and resistance arise. These decisions, repeated daily, become habits. Habits create identity. And identity, reinforced through deliberate choice, is what transforms a temporary comeback into lasting change. Think about it this way. The difference between people who recover after failure and people who remain stuck is not luck, talent, or circumstance. It is the consistency of decision. One person chooses every single day to honor their word, to act despite discomfort, and to align with their values. Another person hopes they will feel motivated, hopes the mood will strike, hopes the perfect conditions will arrive. The first person builds momentum. The second remains stagnant, trapped by the illusion that action requires perfect emotion. A comeback requires courage because decisions are not always easy. Choosing alignment over comfort often means facing pain, uncertainty, and fear. Choosing action over avoidance often means embracing discomfort and resisting the temptation to give in to short-term relief. Choosing integrity over convenience often means making sacrifices, risking criticism, and standing alone. And yet, every choice you make in alignment with your decisions strengthens your trust in yourself. Every step reinforces that your word, your values, and your potential matter more than fleeting moods. The beauty of a decision is that it creates clarity. Once you decide to come back, the noise of indecision fades. Every choice becomes filtered through the lens of your commitment. You no longer have to debate whether you should act or wait. You simply act. Your energy is no longer consumed by hesitation, doubt, or the endless cycle of hope and disappointment. Instead, it is focused, intentional, and aligned with the life you are determined to reclaim. Clarity is not accidental. It is the reward of a decision that is repeated, reinforced, and acted upon consistently. A comeback is not dramatic. It is not defined by headlines, applause, or recognition. It is defined by discipline, by the quiet decisions you make when no one is watching, and by the actions you take that rebuild trust with yourself. Every small act, showing up, keeping a promise, completing a task you said you would, carries far more power than the grand gestures you imagine when waiting for motivation. Because momentum is built through repetition, not mood. Consistency is created through choice, not feeling. And the true power of a comeback is that it restores self-respect, confidence, and clarity that were lost in the drift. Every decision in your comeback has consequences. Every action you take reinforces the identity you are reclaiming. Every moment you choose alignment over avoidance strengthens your self-trust. And the remarkable thing is that this is contagious. When you act intentionally, your environment begins to respond. People notice, opportunities appear, confidence grows, energy returns. And yet the transformation does not come from external validation. It comes from the internal authority you rebuild when your choices reflect your deepest values and your highest standards. Waiting for the right mood is a trap. Waiting for perfect circumstances is an illusion. Waiting for motivation is a guarantee of delay. But a decision does not wait. A decision takes place in the present, regardless of fear, discomfort, or uncertainty. It is a declaration to yourself, and only to yourself, that you will no longer surrender to circumstances or emotion. You are reclaiming your agency, and in doing so, you reclaim your life. Understand this: a comeback is never complete. It is not a finish line you cross once and then forget. It is a process, a daily commitment, a lifestyle of choices aligned with your purpose. Every day presents challenges, doubts, and distractions. Every day tests whether your decisions are stronger than your moods. Every day asks whether your integrity will triumph over convenience. And every day you choose to act, you reinforce that your comeback is real, permanent, and meaningful. The decision to come back is not passive. It requires preparation, planning, and deliberate action. It requires reflection on why you fell, acknowledgement of the patterns that led you astray, and identification of the habits and principles that will guide you forward. It requires honesty, courage, and relentless discipline. And it is not enough to make the decision once. You must make it daily, moment by moment, until the person you promise to honor, the version of yourself you respect and admire, is restored and strengthened. When you make the decision, you reclaim power. You reclaim control over your life. You reclaim your voice, your energy, and your integrity. The comeback becomes inevitable because it is no longer dependent on the whims of motivation or the fluctuations of mood. It is powered by purpose, guided by values, and sustained by deliberate choice. And the remarkable thing is that once you understand this, you realize that every obstacle, every fear, every setback is no longer a threat. It is simply another moment to reaffirm your decision, another opportunity to act in alignment with your highest self. A comeback is a declaration to yourself. It is a promise you cannot break. It is a statement that no matter what has happened, no matter how far you have drifted, you will act. You will show up. You will honor your commitments. You will align your actions with your values. And as you do, the life you thought you lost begins to reemerge, not as a fantasy, not as a dream, not as hope, but as reality. A reality built on choice, discipline, and the unwavering decision to come back. Your mood will fluctuate. Your energy will rise and fall. Motivation will come and go. But your decision, once made, endures. And that is the difference between temporary effort and permanent transformation. That is the difference between a fleeting comeback and a true restoration. That is the moment when your apology to yourself is no longer spoken. It is lived. The apology you owe yourself is not spoken once and then forgotten. It is not a single declaration or a moment of reflection. It is lived every day, in every choice, in every action, in every decision you make when no one is watching. Because the deepest wounds we carry are rarely healed by words alone. They are healed by consistency, integrity, and the relentless alignment of our actions with the person we said we would be. Living the apology every day is about turning regret into momentum, reflection into discipline, and self-betrayal into restoration. When you commit to living the apology, you begin to see your life differently. Every moment carries weight. Every choice matters. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to honor the person you promised to respect. This is not about perfection. It is not about grandeur. It is about presence. It is about showing up for yourself in ways that rebuild trust and reinforce integrity. When you act in alignment with your values, you communicate to yourself that your word matters, that your promise to yourself is sacred, and that the person you are becoming is worth the effort. Living the apology requires attention. It requires mindfulness. You must notice when you are slipping, when you are choosing comfort over courage, when you are letting fear dictate your actions. These moments are tests, invitations to act in alignment, to reclaim your power, and to restore your integrity. Every time you rise to the challenge, every time you act deliberately instead of reacting impulsively, you repay the debt of the compromises you made in the past. You teach yourself that self-respect is not abstract, it is tangible, measurable, and earned in the daily decisions you make. This practice also demands discipline. It is easy to be motivated for a day, a week, or a month. Motivation is a spark. It ignites energy and enthusiasm but fades quickly. Discipline, however, is the engine of consistency. Discipline does not require inspiration. It does not wait for perfect conditions. Discipline shows up when it is uncomfortable, inconvenient, or exhausting. Living the apology every day means cultivating the discipline to act even when you do not feel like it. It means honoring your commitments without seeking recognition. It means choosing long-term integrity over short-term comfort. Living the apology is also an act of courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it. Each day presents moments where fear, doubt, or discomfort will try to pull you back into patterns. Compromise. The safe route is always tempting, the path of least resistance is always available, but the apology you owe yourself is built through action, not inaction. Courage is answering the call even when it is inconvenient, even when the stakes are high, and even when the world does not notice. This is how you reclaim your self-respect and rebuild trust with yourself. Accountability is another essential element. Living the apology every day requires that you measure yourself against your own standards, not someone else's. It means holding yourself responsible for the promises you made and the compromises you have allowed. It requires honesty, brutal if necessary, about where you fall short and where you succeed. Accountability is not punishment, it is clarity. It is the mechanism by which you ensure that your daily actions are aligned with the life you want to live. Without accountability, the apology remains theoretical, abstract, and ineffective. Small actions compound over time. The power of living the apology is that every decision, no matter how minor it seems, contributes to a larger transformation. Showing up for yourself in a small way today, finishing a task you procrastinated on, having a difficult conversation you avoided, speaking your truth, builds momentum. Each of these actions reinforces trust, integrity, and alignment. Over weeks and months, these seemingly insignificant steps become habits. Habits define character, and character is the ultimate measure of a life rebuilt, a life lived in alignment, a life where the apology has been internalized and transformed into daily practice. It is important to recognize that setbacks will occur. You will make mistakes. You will slip. You will fall back into old patterns. That is not failure. That is human. Living the apology every day is not about perfection. It is about persistence. Each time you stumble, you choose to rise again. You choose to recommit. You choose to act deliberately, aligned with your values, and consistent with the person you promised to honor. The strength of your comeback is measured not by your absence of failure, but by your resilience in responding to it. Reflection is another pillar of living the apology. Daily reflection allows you to examine your choices, recognize moments of compromise, and adjust your actions moving forward. Without reflection, the apology cannot be internalized. Reflection is not self-criticism, it is self-awareness. It is the act of observing your behaviors, evaluating their alignment with your values, and making adjustments. Reflection keeps you honest. Reflection keeps you conscious. Reflection ensures that your apology is not a fleeting sentiment, but a lived reality. Living the apology every day also requires that you embrace discomfort. Growth, integrity, and alignment are rarely convenient. They often require sacrifice, confrontation, and persistence in the face of adversity. Discomfort is the signal that you are moving in the right direction, that you are challenging old habits, and that you are rebuilding what was lost. Avoiding discomfort is what allowed self-betrayal to take root. Embracing discomfort is how you restore yourself. Each time you choose the path that challenges you, you act in alignment with your apology and reaffirm your commitment to the person you are becoming. There is an invisible force that grows when you live the apology daily. Confidence, Confidence does not come from success alone. It comes from alignment. Confidence is the product of repeated action that reflects your values and integrity. Every time you act in accordance with your promises, you reinforce trust in yourself. You prove to yourself that you are capable of honoring your word, of making difficult choices, of reclaiming your life. This confidence is unshakable because it is built on the solid foundation of integrity, not external validation. The most profound aspect of living the apology is that it transforms identity. You are not simply correcting past mistakes or making up for lost opportunities. You are becoming the person you were always meant to be. You are reclaiming the version of yourself that was buried under fear, compromise, and comfort. You are demonstrating through consistent action that you are trustworthy, disciplined, and aligned. And over time, this identity becomes permanent. Not because someone told you it is possible, but because you proved it to yourself every single day. Living the apology every day is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, persistent, and consistent. It is waking up when you want to sleep. It is acting when you want to avoid. It is speaking truth when lies would be easier. It is choosing the hard path because it is the right path. And yet, this quiet, persistent practice carries the greatest power. It is the engine of trust, integrity, and alignment. It is the essence of a comeback that is not just temporary but enduring. When you embrace this practice fully, the apology is no longer a burden. It becomes a guiding principle, a compass that shapes every decision. You no longer measure your life by regret. You measure it by alignment. You no longer define yourself by what you have lost. You define yourself by what you are building, moment by moment, choice by choice, habit by habit. The apology is no longer something you carry. It becomes the life you live. In the end, living the apology every day is the ultimate act of self-respect. It is the demonstration that your word matters, that your commitments matter, that the person you promise to honor is worthy of effort, discipline, and courage. It is the embodiment of integrity, the foundation of trust, and the pathway to transformation. Every action aligned with your apology is a declaration that you are reclaiming your life, restoring your self-respect, and honoring the highest version of yourself. And when this becomes your daily practice, the comeback is complete, not in moments, not in declarations, but in the life you now live with purpose, alignment, and unshakable integrity. As we draw this journey to a close, it's important to remember that a comeback is not a fleeting moment. It is a deliberate daily choice. It begins not with the world noticing, not with applause, and not with circumstances aligning perfectly. It begins with you. It begins with the decision to be honest with yourself about where you drifted, what compromises you made, and what promises you broke. And it begins with the courage to say, without excuses, that you are ready to reclaim the person you promised to be. The most profound realization is this: the apology you owe is not for anyone else. It is not to the people who doubted you or the world that judged you. It is to yourself, the one person who has been with you through every silent moment, every fear, every hesitation, every unspoken dream. Self-respect, trust, and integrity are not gifts the world can give you. They are commitments you must honor to yourself, and this is the foundation of your comeback. We've explored why understanding your fall matters more than the fall itself. The reasons behind your setbacks are not weaknesses. They are insights, lessons, and guideposts pointing to what needs to change. They are opportunities to illuminate the patterns that pulled you off course and to understand the invisible forces that once dictated your choices. Confronting the why equips you with awareness, clarity, and the foresight to navigate the future intentionally. Without it, every attempt to rise will be temporary. With it, every step becomes purposeful and aligned. We've learned that self-betrayal is the cost of playing small. When you shrink yourself, dim your ideas, or settle for comfort, you pay a heavy price, not in money or recognition, but in self-trust, confidence, and energy. And yet, this cost is reversible. Every deliberate choice to act in alignment with your values restores integrity, builds momentum, and repairs the damage done by compromises of the past. The comeback is not about grandeur. It is about showing up consistently for yourself, even when it's difficult, inconvenient, or lonely. A comeback is not fueled by moods, feelings, or fleeting motivation. It is powered by decision. It is the daily choice to rise above fear, to honor your commitments, and to act in alignment with the person you promised to be. Discipline, repetition, and intentionality transform that decision into identity. And once identity is restored, self-trust grows, clarity emerges, and confidence follows, not because circumstances have changed, but because your alignment with yourself has. Finally, living the apology every day is where transformation becomes permanent. It is in the daily acts of courage, discipline, reflection, and alignment that your comeback takes root. It is in the quiet moments when no one is watching that trust is rebuilt. It is through consistent, deliberate action that regret becomes momentum and compromise becomes integrity. Every choice, every decision, every action is a declaration that your word matters, that your values matter, and that your life is worth reclaiming. So, let this comeback be your most powerful apology. Not spoken, not written, not shared, but lived. Let it be deliberate, relentless, and aligned. Let it be your declaration to yourself that you will no longer drift, shrink, or compromise your potential. Every day you live in alignment is a day you honor the promises you made, the person you are becoming, and the life you were always meant to lead. This is the comeback that matters. This is the apology that heals. And this, above all else, is the life you were meant to reclaim